Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the Dragonflight Season 4 content update notes, which have just come out. There's a lot of new information here about how Season 4 is going to work. I am probably going to cover a reasonable amount of Season 4 stuff on this channel, but I'll also have War Within stuff on the channel too, so if you're completely uninterested in Season 4, I don't particularly blame you, and you can probably find by the titles which videos are about that and which are about War Within. But if you are interested in Season 4, which I'll be playing quite a bit of this season, I suspect, there are some revelations about how exactly it's going to work. So first off, every 2 weeks, one of the 3 raids will become awakened, and enemies within the awakened raids are stronger and drop upgraded loot with a higher eye level. So in Shadowlands Season 4, this rotated every 1 week, but in Dragonflight it's going to be every 2 weeks, and it's actually just each raid once, and then on week 7 plus, all raids are awakened. So this has a few implications. First of all, this is a little bit of a niche case, but if you are in a guild like mine that is going to sell Mythic Fire-Ak on the easy weeks where Fire-Ak is not actually buffed to sell mounts, that's only going to be 4 total weeks, and then Fire-Ak is going to be awakened for the remainder of the season. So if you're either on the buying or selling side of Fire-Ak mounts, that means the price isn't going to drop by as much as it otherwise would have. I actually think this is pretty good, though. This solves a couple things that Shadowlands had as problems with this, which was rotating every week was pretty jarring to players. A lot of guilds would kind of feel this thing of like every single week we are thrust once again into something that we're unfamiliar with, right? And by the time we've built up that familiarity, it's the end of the week and it's time for us to play a new raid, and we're remembering everything again. So I think giving each raid 2 weeks and then going on to the all raids being awakened thing is probably a better way of doing this. Once all the raids are awakened, I suspect that there will be, I mean, just in general, Season 4 causes some strife within guilds, but I think week 7 plus, when all raids are awakened, you should have a talk with your guild about, like, what do we actually want to do during this, right? Like, what are our objectives here? If we're normally a Mythic raiding guild, how quickly do we want to push up into Mythic Awakened? If we're not normally a Mythic guild, if we're just a Heroic guild, are we interested in doing, for instance, Heroic Vault the Incarnates on both weeks 1 and 2? Or do we want to just do one total run across those 2 weeks and then extend it on week 2 or whatever, and whenever we're done with it, we're done, and we just do one run across the 2 weeks? Once we're on week 7 plus, how do we want to approach that as well? Do we want to do every single raid every single week, or do we want to alternate which raid we're doing? Do we want to do the skip? Do we want to just, like, skip to Razageth, skip to Sarkareth, skip to Fire-Ak, do all those? Those sorts of questions are difficult ones for guilds to answer, but they're usually not insurmountable. And in my experience, the guilds that struggle the most from these are the ones that don't have a good discussion about it beforehand and don't kind of get everybody on the same page about what they're going to try and accomplish and do during the Fated season or during the Awakened season. So that's my recommendation for anybody in guild leadership looking at this schedule. Okay, there's also going to be a buff that increases rep gain with various reputations whenever a specific raid is awakened, which, again, each raid is only going to be awakened once, and then they're all awakened. And basically, Vault of the Incarnates, most of the Season 1 reps are going to be awakened, although Valdrakken Accord is going to be during Amirdasil week. And then Aberys, it's the Season 2 reps, and Sibelian and Rathian. And Amirdasil, it's the Season 3 rep, and the Valdrakken Accord, so nice little way to get some extra rep if you are still searching there, or if there's Paragon rewards you're looking for from any of these reps. And then all the raids will drop a new tier token that will have the appearance and set bonus combination that was voted for. I think there's a Wowhead post. There's not actually an official Blizzard source, I don't think, but there's a Wowhead post that has what all of those set bonuses are. So you can see what you're looking forward to there. Generally, most specs, I think, are pretty happy with what won their vote, except for Moonkins, who were expecting it to get reverted to the Season 1 version, and it didn't. It only got like a third of the way reverted, so Moonkins got a little owned, and I think it might be not supposed to put on the new tier until it's like really high eye level or something as well, so yeah, get owned if you're Moonkin. Sorry about that. It's very funny, but it is pretty unfortunate. Then there's also 1 bronze bullion a week by defeating awakened bosses, and the cap rises by 1 each week, so if you miss a week, you'll be able to catch up to the current weekly max. So we don't know exactly how this is earned by defeating awakened bosses. We don't know if it will just drop from the first awakened boss you kill each week, or if it'll drop from one of the first 5 Awakened bosses you kill each week, and by the time you get to that 5th one, it's, guaranteed bad luck protection drop or whatever. We have no idea exactly how that's going to function. We do know that during PTR testing, it was data mined that the bonus quest that says, hey, go do M+ dungeons this week, that quest had 2 Bullion associated with completing it. There's no mention of that here, but it's possible that there will be that sort of other source for Bullion from whenever it becomes Mythic Dungeon Week, for instance. Or that might have just been something that was on PTR that's not going to make it to live. The fact that there's not mention of it here maybe means that's more likely, actually. I've seen a little bit of consternation around only getting 1 Bullion per week, because you do have to exchange 2 Bullion to actually get any weapons, trinkets, or items with special effects. That's like Diurna Ring, Aranog Ring, any of those sorts of things. You can exchange 2 Bullion for, and they'll be like eye level 502, and they'll be on this special upgrade track that goes all the way up to, top mythic eye level. So it's a pretty interesting reward structure for those items that I think makes a lot of sense, actually, for doing it that way, and it kind of replaces the eye level upgrade system that existed in Shadowlands Season 4, but it makes it fit with the current crests and flight zones thing. So you'll basically get items that are on this upgrade track that brings them through all of the different crests. But yeah, 1 Bullion per week is actually faster than Shadowlands Season 4 was. In Shadowlands Season 4, it took you 3 weeks to get your first dinar item, 2 weeks to get your second one after that, and 1 week to get your third after that, and then it stopped. So with this system, you'll get your first faster, you'll get your second faster, you'll get your third at the same time, and then you'll get your fourth, whereas back in Shadowlands, you didn't ever get a fourth or beyond on those dinars. And also back in Shadowlands, you didn't actually get progress towards that cap going up over time. So if you missed a week, you just missed that week, and you had to kill like every raid boss in each raid to get the progress on that quest line. So this is a moderately more friendly, particularly to alts that you miss a week on, or characters that you play later in the patch. It's moderately more friendly than the Shadowlands version of this, but it's not like super accelerated compared to Shadowlands Season 4. You don't just instantly get all the things. But most characters, right, you have one big thing that you're going to want to spend Bullion on early on. For instance, if you're a legendary wielder, either of the legendaries, you're going to be able to purchase a Scale of Awakening with 2 Bullion that puts it onto that 502 up to 536 or 528 or whatever track. That's going to be your first 2 Bullion, and that's going to be a huge power level jump. But then after that, or for people who don't have a legendary, you're just looking at getting trinkets probably, or maybe you're looking at like, hey, I want to get the Aranog ring and the Broodkeeper ring, get those kind of items with special effects. And those, there's pretty quickly, once the first of those, right, getting your Bis trinket, getting your legendary upgrade, like that's a big power spike. Getting the third thing from this Bullion vendor is going to be a lot smaller of a deal. And so I think that the timing on this actually is going to work out pretty well. I wouldn't mind if you got an extra Bullion on week 1 so you could just get something on the first week. I think that would probably be a change that I would make to how this functioned, but I still think this is a pretty fair way of handing these things out. And yeah, again, then also legendary. So legendaries will drop as usual from the raids, but players who have previously obtained them can purchase a Scale of Awakening to upgrade them. So if you actually haven't earned Firalath or Nezuro yet, there's probably good reason, if you're close on the bad luck protection, to not kill these raids. Like, don't try and farm it, except when that raid is awakened. Because it looks like if you drop it from the raid when it's awakened, it'll be the Season 4 eye level. And if you drop it from the raid when it's not awakened, it'll be the Season 3 or Season 2 eye level, and then you'll need to spend 2 Bullion to upgrade it. Again, those 2 Bullion, that's just 2 weeks of extra time that get taken off of, buying a trinket or whatever instead. But if you happen to be one of those rare players that's like, I think that this will be most relevant for people who have an Evoker that killed a bunch of Heroic Sarkreths in Season 2 but didn't actually get lucky because they've increased the bad luck protection like retroactively. So you may be in a position where you're guaranteed to get the legendary on your next Sarkareth kill. And you might want to save that Sarkareth kill for, week 3, 4, or 7+. A pretty niche situation that not a lot of people are in, but it is something that occurred to me on reading this. Then, rewards. There are rewards for completing the Awakened Raids, very similar to the Fated Raids in Shadowlands. Completing all 3 on normal difficulty gets you the Voyaging Wildering Dynamic Flight Mount. If you complete them all on Heroic, you get the title Awakened Hero, and if you complete them all on Mythic, you will get path portals to the 3 raids. So teleports to the 3 raids. Pretty nifty, pretty neat little rewards, and those will be account-wide portals too. So I guess the dungeon ones are going to become account-wide and War Within as well. So pretty cool. You know, it's always nice to have a little bit of extra ability to travel around the world, right? But it's a pretty minor thing, right? Like, you know, do you really need to evolve the Incarnates teleport if you have an Algathar Academy teleport, for instance? Probably not going to be something that changes your life all that much in 5 years' time, right? It's probably not a portal that you'll make much use of. I've used my Shadowlands portals like once. You remember when they figured out how to get that new Hearthstone from Zareth Mortis? I used my Sepulchre port then, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm getting value out of this thing, but that's the only time I've made use of the Shadowlands version of these things, so I wouldn't feel too much FOMO. Even if you're a Mythic Raider, for instance, and your guild is taking off Faded or Awakened, I wouldn't feel too much FOMO about these. Okay, Mythic Plus. Return to all 8 dungeons for refined and rewarding progression curve for Heroic, Mythic, and M+. Better pacing and meaningful rewards. We talked about this already. There's a video on my channel from like a month ago where we look at how they've moved the key levels around. This has a little bit, if you were somebody this season who was doing between 10 and 20 keys, this is going to affect you by slightly changing where affixes get added in terms of relative to the difficulty of the dungeons. If you were doing less than 10 keys, then you're actually going to be on the M0 ecosystem instead, and that might be fantastic for you because then you don't have to deal with the timer. It might be not nice for you because now you're on a weekly reset instead of on infinite playability as well, so those are the main changes there. If you were doing higher than 20 keys, the only thing that's really changing with this is that the number next to your keystone has gone down by 10, but otherwise there's no change. There's also a new KSM mount, which is an infinite recolor of the Armoridon. There's a Draconic title for Keystone Conqueror, and there is Draconic Hero going to be available for the M+ title, so pretty cool hero title. There's also, let's see, PvP rewards coming in. So Draconic Gladiator, Draconic Legend. Pretty cool titles actually there. We also have, dungeon changes. Most notable changes, removal of the timer for dungeons for what are currently 0 and 10, right? 0 and 10s are just getting turned into M's. That whole difficulty curve is squished into M0s now. So, in fact, what was previously an M0 is going to be more like what a Heroic dungeon will be next patch. And then if you were doing anywhere higher than that, then that difficulty is going to be most closely represented by an M0. And then once you get to a plus 11 key, that's going to be like similar to a plus 2 key back in previous seasons. So Heroic difficulty and rewards, will move up to roughly the current level of M0, and they'll still be available to queue into via Group Finder, but the item level requirement's going to go up. So this is nice. Now there's some harder content that you can queue up for in Group Finder, and then M0, again, bit hand-wavy, but similar to M8 to 10. The existing M+ system will pick up where that leaves off, such that a Mythic 5 in Season 4 is roughly equivalent to difficulty rewards and rating awarded to a 15 today. Notably, this is in addition to the eye level jump. So a plus 5 in Season 4, what's not written here, but what I'm almost certain should be, or is implied here, is a Mythic 5 in Season 4 with 39 higher eye level of gear on your character is roughly equivalent in difficulty, rewards, and M+ rating to a Mythic 15 today. So that it's not just the usual, a 5 is like a 10 used to be because the scaling changed. Like, no. Scaling held constant, it's getting 10 levels harder. Affixes are now slotting in as well at plus 2, plus 5, plus 10. We've moved Fortified and Tyran back over to plus 2, and then Entangling, Incorporeal, etc. on plus 5, and the on-death affix row, the row that's mostly on-death affixes, is on plus 10s, which of course means that if you were previously doing 17s and you had all 3 affixes on your keys, now you'll be doing plus 7s, and you won't actually have to deal with that on-death affix row. So that's pretty nice. That's a pretty nice change for those sorts of players. At the beginning of Season 4, all keystones will be reset to level 2, regardless of levels. This is done due to our difficulty refactoring of Mythic and M+. I've gotten a lot of questions on my stream over the past few days, during the brief moments I've been streaming in between making videos, that have been like, hey, what level key do I need to do to get a 20 next season? It's a pretty common question. And it looks like just none of that's going to matter. No matter what you do this season, you're going to be starting off again on a plus 2 at the beginning of Season 4. They're saying this is done due to difficulty refactoring. I kind of think they should just do this every season, actually. I kind of think that the running a really high key and potentially weekly no levering a really high key at the end of a previous season so you can start off the new season with a really high key. I kind of feel like that process of building up and pushing the keystones in the first week is a pretty fun one. It does create a little bit of a weird incentive where, you know, if you have 5 players that could all be doing a +10 and they all start with +2s, you push up one of those keys and then you just keep using that person's key and the other 4 people have dead +2 keys. So maybe there's a way that this could be, that, you know, that could address that little problem with my idea. But aside from that, I think this will be pretty fun. It's just always fun to do that early push of keys, and it only takes an hour or two, right? If you're 3-chesting those low level keys, then you know, and it's not like a level 2 is going to be low level at the start for very many players as well, because that's going to be similar to a +12 would have been +39 eye levels of scaling on top of that as well. So, you know, it's going to be already a pretty high challenge for a starter key. The basic structure of dungeon rewards isn't changing. So yeah, basically, you know, you can, if you just think to myself, I'm going to subtract 10 from my keystone level last season, and that's what the keystone level is this season, the rewards should be comparable to what you're expecting them to be in your head. Crescent flight zones are changing to match the same difficulty with some minor adjustments as well. You still get extra flight zones if somebody's score go up. Whelplings obviously are outside of the M+ range now, so you'll get them from other sources only, not from M+ anymore. And you'll get Drake's Crests on M0 dungeon completion without a timer. A little bit less than you'd get from timing a key. And yeah, then worms from 2 to 5 and aspects from 6 and up. Makes sense. We're also adding in the Northrend Cup. I did the Kalimdor Cup. I didn't actually do Eastern Kingdoms or Outland. I think I'm going to do Northrend, though. Northrend is such a... I wish I'd done the Outland one, actually. I just kind of forgot about it, and then it was gone. So, yeah, this is coming soon if you're a Dragon Rider, Dragon Racing enjoyer. We also have some class tuning. So this is the only major class tuning coming here, which is throughput nerfs, 5% to Ardruid, 13% to Mistweaver. Disc is going to be getting its atonement transfer nerfed, but then buffed back outside of raids. So I think this is what, 150 to 170, which is like 14%? Something. Okay, hang on. Calculator. 170 divided by 150. A 13% healing increase outside of raids, depending on how you look at that. But then they're also getting a 40% down to 35. So getting so basically this just compensates for this outside of raids. But then inside of raids, they're going to be transferring, 15% less healing or so roughly than they previously were. Okay, and then Resto Shaman is getting a 5% throughput nerf as well, which this was the one that stood out to me as like, oh, oof. Poor Arshaman getting shot despite not being particularly played right now. So sad days for the Arshams out there. But yeah, I'm kind of sad to not see something here that's like aimed at maybe Vengeance Demon Hunter. Maybe, something aimed at like Rogue, Subtlety Rogue's damage in raid. I feel like this season is trying to do a lot of, like, it's trying to keep people entertained without doing too much work. And I get that, right? I get why from Blizzard's perspective that's what they're trying to do with this season. I feel like investing in doing some tuning to shake up the meta, at least for me, would go a long way. Because, like, for me, if it's another season where we're playing the exact same team comp in M+, versus if it's a season where that's shaken up more, that's a pretty big difference for me. Now, I don't know how much time would go into doing that from, like, the devs' end, but that would have been something I really would have liked to see in Season 4 at the start. There's still time for them to do it. Like, if they do it in the first couple weeks of the season, that would also be great. But, I for instance, it's really hard to imagine, even with new set bonuses, with a new set of dungeons, it's really hard to imagine something being better than Vengeance Demon Hunter, for instance, for high keys. And I'm sad to not see them take a little swing at that, or at least, even if not making it so that Vengeance Demon Hunter isn't the best anymore, at least making it so that some other choices are a little bit more competitive with it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that the tier set changes are enough for that. Obviously, I've seen a lot of copium about like, oh well, Guardians getting back their season 2 set bonus. I personally don't think that's the secret sauce they need to compete with Vengeance in the current state of it. But I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope I'm wrong about that overall, or I hope that there's further tuning coming. But I'm definitely disappointed to see this be the entirety of this section here. We've also got battle res restrictions in LFR now use the same shared charge system as other raid difficulties, and groups in Raid Finder now start with 6 B-reses and gain a charge every 90 to 150 seconds depending on group size. This does not matter at all because groups in Raid Finder always start with 0 people who have battle res bound, so no matter how many B-res charges you give to them, it doesn't change anything. Nobody is casting. I've never in my life seen anybody cast a battle res in a Raid Finder encounter, and I've done a reasonable amount of Raid Finder content over the years, much more than you'd expect, actually, probably. Avarice is so okay. Then there's a bunch of raid nerfs here, for instance. So Volcanic Heart's going to be targeting only 4 players on Mythic, and I'm actually not going to read through all of the nerfs that are coming to these different. I guess these are the only raid ones. There's also Razageth nerfs. But the main thing to note is that all of the previous rounds of nerfs are also still in effect for these bosses. So the only big question is what tuning are they going to be, like how much damage and health is Awakened going to add to these mobs? I think they should probably target these fights to be substantially easier than they were, or than they would have been even with all these nerfs in, right? Like, I think that they should make the numbers checks on these fights very forgiving for Awakened Season, and that's pretty much what they did with Fated Season in Shadowlands. So they should make it so that, if you were a guild that killed Mythic Razageth back the first time, and you get reasonably good Awakened gear, right? Like, not full bis or whatever, but you have some Hero Track, some Myth Track Awakened gear on, you should find the DPS checks on Razageth to be not very tight at all. You should find that you don't need to fully remember and fully reset back up everything, but just like mostly do that, and you should find the fight to be doable. That's how I think they should aim for these things, and that's pretty much what they did back in Shadowlands. So I expect that is where they're going. We're also getting Dawn of the Infinite Hard Mode, getting some extra tuning and rewards updates. Hard Mode does not have a timer and rewards a Hero Track item. It's intended to be more challenging than a standard Mythic difficulty dungeon. This is, I think, good in theory. One problem is that Dawn of the Infinite Hard Mode is the only source, or Dawn of the Infinite is the only source of a cheat death trinket this season, which means that I think for a lot of tanks, the best gear set you can have is going to include farming Dawn of the Infinite Hard Mode every week until you can get a heroic Prophetic Stone Scales, and then you wear one of those things at Hero 6 out of 6, and that's going to be better than 2 trinkets that you could buy with Bullions. I think that is bad. I think that it is bad if that is the incentives created by any given season. So I think they should change that. I thought it was bad back in BFA when Fire Mages were going back to Eternal Palace to get a Font of Power when they were PvPing for badge. I think it's bad anytime there is something outside of the main ecosystem that a few specs have to go and do. I feel like that often creates a pretty big barrier to people being interested in rolling up one of those as an alt. I know for a lot of my friends, for instance, would be a lot less interested in rolling up any character that wanted to go and do Dawn of the Infinite Hard Mode. I do think it is just the cheat death trinket because people bring up stuff like Iridol, but the reality is, a heroic Iridol 6 out of 6 compared to being able to buy a Myth Track item from any of the raids, right? Like, compare that to a Mythic Dreambinder, for instance, that you could get. For some specs, that's going to be competitive, actually, but it's not like, this is the only source of something like it, right? So I think that's something that, particularly that cheat death trinket, although Iridol as well, a couple other trinkets from there as well, potentially like Mirror, are things that I think they should look at. Like, realistically, there are a few options available to them. The most Blizzard option is to just nerf the trinket that people want to farm. The most Blizzard thing they could do is nerf it after a few weeks, after some people have already farmed it. I hope they don't go with that option, but it would technically solve the problem. Other options would be to just put those trinkets on the Bullion vendor, and Iridol as well. Even though you can't technically get them from this season's content, I think given that you can get them from an updated eye level in Heroic, or in hard mode. I think that would make sense. Or they could rework some trinkets. Now, obviously, the window for doing this is probably past, but you could take a look at some underused tank trinkets like the Kazara tank trinket and be like, okay, we're going to turn this thing into a cheat death trinket. And that way, there's not a need to go to Dawn of the Infinite to collect one of those things. So that is something that I identify as like a minor annoyance gripe problem with this season. I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. I think it's probably going to go live and unfixed. And we're just going to have to deal with it, and it's going to make the season a little bit worse. We also have a bunch of tuning coming to various dungeons, all the Season 1 dungeons. I'm not going to go through this. There have been some of these have been in various posts in the past, but I'll highlight that they're doing a lot of changes here. They're trying to make the left path through Brackenhide a little bit more appealing. I don't actually think they've accomplished that fully, but the changes they've made to the Rangers, previously known as the Stalkers, the changes they made to Hackclaw's Warband, the changes in Halls of Infusion, the changes to the Burning Chains, all are really good changes. They give me a lot of hope for these dungeons feeling a lot better than they did in their respective seasons. So pretty excited about that. I think that the M Plus experience with these changes is, I think, going to be a lot better, and it's going to feel refreshed compared to the seasons they were in, rather than like, oh no, I have to do the same annoying part of these dungeons, right? Like, it's just doing a little bit of stuff like adding the checkpoint in Halls of Infusion, making the last boss happen at a health instead of an energy checkpoint, cutting in half the damage of Containment Beam. That's going to change these dungeons from like, oh no, I have to do this annoying bit again, to, oh cool, now I can do this dungeon without this annoying bit. And that is a huge change. So a lot of props to Blizzard for putting the time in to refurbish these dungeons. And I think potentially an argument for, it being good to keep dungeons for more than one season is that I think these dungeons are going to be a lot more fun the second time around with these changes made, but a lot less people are going to play them because it's going to be in the season that I suspect a lot less people will play than seasons 1 and 2. Okay, then we also have a little bit of PvP tuning. More honor from Battleground Blitz contributing to the Great Vault. Of course, Battleground Blitz we know now will be a primary way of PvPing in the next expansion, and some nerfs to Disc, or a nerf to Mistweaver and a buff to Disc in PvP. Those are the changes coming with Season 4. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I'm going to try and make some content, some guide content for what to spend your bullions on, that kind of stuff. Luckily, I've got an extra week before I have to even start worrying about that, because you can't buy anything with them next week anyway. So, that'll be, those will probably come out over the course of next week, something like that. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope it helps. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on Season 4, whether any of these changes have something about them that I've missed, or just what you think about them in general. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.